Thunder crashed outside the towering glass headquarters of Vertex Industries as rain lashed against the windows like angry fingers. Alexander Reed stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office, a coffee mug clutched in his hand, his steel-grey eyes reflecting the storm. The city of Boston lay beneath him, a maze of lights and shadows, much like the empire he had built from nothing. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, breaking his trance. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Mr. Reed, the woman from the community center is here, the one who can't make the payment. Alexander's lips curled into a cold smile. Another charity case, another opportunity to demonstrate that in his world, nothing came without a price. "Send her in," he replied, his voice as smooth as polished marble. He moved to his desk, a massive slab of black obsidian that dominated the room, and settled into his leather chair. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence within him, a day of failed negotiations, plummeting stocks, and now this trivial distraction. The door opened, and she entered. She was nothing like what he had expected. Small in stature, but with an unmistakable presence, she wore a simple navy blue dress that had seen better days, her dark hair pulled back into a practical bun. Her coffee-colored eyes met his without flinching, without the fear or intimidation he was accustomed to seeing. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice steady. "I'm Sophia Chen from Eastside Community Center. Thank you for seeing me." Alexander gestured to the chair across from him without standing. "I understand you're here about the rent increase. My property management company tells me you're 3 months behind." Sophia nodded, placing a worn leather portfolio on her lap. "Yes, the center serves over 200 families in the neighborhood. The recent rent increase from $3,000 to $8,000 per month was unexpected and not something our budget can accommodate." "Business is business, Ms. Chen," Alexander replied, glancing at his watch. "Vertex Industries acquired that building as an investment, not a charity. The market dictates the price. The market doesn't account for the children who will lose their after-school programs, or the elderly who depend on our food distribution," Sophia responded, opening her portfolio. "I have a proposal." Alexander cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Let me save us both some time. I've reviewed your center's financials. You're hemorrhaging money, running programs you can't afford, in a building you can no longer pay for." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "But I'm feeling generous today. If you can't pay, you can work for me." Sophia's expression remained unchanged, though something flickered in her eyes. "Work for you? Vertex needs a new community liaison, someone to manage our charitable initiatives. Consider it a win-win. You'll have a salary, and your little center gets to stay open, provided you implement the changes I suggest to make it financially viable." Alexander's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I question whether someone who can't balance a simple community center budget has the skills for corporate America." For a moment, silence filled the office, punctuated only by the drumming of rain against glass. Then Sophia reached into her portfolio and withdrew a sleek presentation folder with the Harvard Business School crest embossed on its cover. "Mr. Reed, before I respond to your offer, I think you should review this," she said, sliding it across the desk. Alexander opened it with casual indifference, but his expression froze as he scanned the contents. A Harvard MBA with highest honors. Letters of recommendation from Fortune 500 CEOs. A resume detailing consulting work for global corporations that dwarfed even Vertex Industries. "I spent 5 years at Goldman Sachs before choosing to redirect my skills to nonprofit management," Sophia said quietly. "The Eastside Community Center runs at a 96% efficiency rating despite serving an underprivileged community with limited resources. Our budget shortfall isn't due to mismanagement, Mr. Reed. It's because we choose to serve those who can't pay. Alexander's jaw tightened. He closed the folder slowly, reassessing the woman before him. If you have these credentials, why are you running a failing community center in the worst part of Boston? Because not all value can be measured in dollars, Mr. Reed. Sophia reclaimed the folder, her gaze level. Now, about my proposal. We can discuss it, or I can take it to your competitors. Wayland Corp has expressed interest in positive community partnerships. The name of his chief rival sent a jolt through Alexander. He straightened in his chair, professional mask firmly back in place. That won't be necessary. Let's hear your proposal. Sophia nodded and began outlining a plan that would allow the community center to gradually adjust to increased rent through a series of corporate-sponsored programs. Her presentation was flawless, her grasp of financials impeccable. Alexander found himself listening with growing interest, not just to the proposal, but to the enigma of Sophia Chen herself. When she finished, he tapped his fingers against the obsidian desk. Your proposal has merit, but I need to understand why someone with your background would choose to waste their talents on a neighborhood most people have written off. Sophia's expression softened slightly. That community raised me, Mr. Reed. After my parents died, it was the center that kept me from falling through the cracks. Mrs. Williams, who still teaches art there, helped me apply to college. Mr. Jackson, our elderly computer instructor, let me use the center's only computer to complete my assignments. She paused. Not everyone has the luxury of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. Sometimes they need bootstraps first. Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming call from his executive team. A welcome interruption from the uncomfortable direction of the conversation. I need to take this, he said abruptly. Leave your proposal with my assistant. I'll have an answer for you by the end of the week. Sophia gathered her materials and stood. Thank you for your time, Mr. Reed. At the door, she turned back. And just so you know, I did consider your job offer, but I already have the more difficult job. After she left, Alexander remained at his desk, the storm outside beginning to wane. He pulled up Sophia Chen's records on his computer, digging deeper than the surface check his team had performed. Harvard MBA, yes, but there was more. Orphaned at 12. Full scholarship to Princeton for undergraduate studies. Offers from every top consulting firm upon graduation. And then, 3 years ago, she had walked away from a 7-figure salary to take over a struggling community center in the neighborhood where she grew up. His assistant knocked lightly before entering. Sir, the board is waiting for you in the conference room. Alexander nodded absently, still staring at Sophia's file. Clara, what do we know about Eastside Community Center's programs? Not much, sir. It's in the old riverfront district. They offer after-school care, adult education, food assistance, standard community services. Find out more, he said suddenly. I want a complete breakdown of their operations, their impact, metrics, everything. Clara looked surprised but nodded. Of course. Also, Ms. Chen left this for you. She placed a small card on his desk before departing. Alexander picked it up. It was a simple invitation to visit the Eastside Community Center. The following day, see what we do before you decide, it read, followed by an address and time. He should delegate this, send his community relations team to evaluate the center and make a recommendation. That would be the efficient approach. Yet, something about Sophia Chen's unwavering gaze, her quiet confidence in the face of his dismissal, had unsettled him. The next morning, Alexander instructed his driver to take him to the Eastside Community Center. He dressed down in a casual button-up and slacks, though even these marked him as an outsider in this neighborhood of weathered brick buildings and corner stores with barred windows. The community center itself was a three-story structure that had once been a factory, its faded red brick contrasting with a brightly painted mural of children's handprints surrounding the entrance. Inside, the space buzzed with activity. A group of elderly residents practiced Tai Chi in one corner of the main hall. Children clustered around tables where college-aged volunteers helped with homework. Through an open doorway, Alexander glimpsed a computer lab where adults of various ages focused intently on their screens. "Mr. Reed," Sophia's voice came from behind him, "I wasn't sure you'd come." He turned to find her dressed similarly to yesterday, though today she wore a simple cardigan over her dress, a visitor badge clipped to the pocket. "I like to see investments firsthand," he replied coolly. "Then let me show you what you'd be investing in," she said, gesturing for him to follow. For the next hour, Sophia led him through the center, introducing him to instructors and participants alike. He met Mrs. Williams, now in her 70s, who beamed with pride as she showed him student artwork. He watched Mr. Jackson, well into his 80s, patiently teaching an elderly woman how to video chat with her grandchildren overseas. In a small kitchen at the back, volunteers prepared meals for a food distribution program. "We serve dinner 5 nights a week," Sophia explained. "For many of our elderly residents and some of the children, it's their only reliable meal." Alexander observed, it all with a businessman's calculating eye, noting the efficient use of space, the maximizing of limited resources. But something else was becoming apparent too, the genuine warmth between Sophia and everyone they encountered, the respect she commanded not through authority, but through connection. As they climbed the stairs to the second floor, Alexander asked, "How many staff do you employ?" "4 full-time, including myself," Sophia replied, "and about 30 regular volunteers." "That's impossible," he scoffed. "The programs I've seen would require at least 15 full-time employees to manage." Sophia smiled slightly. "Efficiency. Mr. Reed, something I believe we both value, though perhaps in different ways." They reached a classroom where a young man was teaching what appeared to be a business skills class to a diverse group of adults. Through the window, Alexander could see them working on laptops, the instructor moving from person to person, offering guidance. "This is our micro-enterprise program," Sophia explained. "We help local residents start small businesses, everything from catering services to handyman work. The laptops were donated by a tech company. The instructor is Miguel, one of our success stories. He started a web design business through this program 3 years ago. Now he teaches while running his company." Alexander watched the class with growing interest. The instructor, Miguel, couldn't be more than 25, yet he commanded the room with the confidence of a seasoned professional. The students, ranging from young adults to middle-aged parents, listened attentively, occasionally breaking into discussion groups. "What's the success rate?" Alexander asked, his analytical mind automatically seeking metrics. 78% of our graduates are still in business after 2 years, Sophia replied. "The national average is around 50%. We're selective about who enters the program, and we provide ongoing mentorship." Alexander raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed despite himself. "That's remarkable for a neighborhood like this." Sophia's expression cooled slightly. "What exactly do you mean by a neighborhood like this, Mr. Reed?" He gestured vaguely toward the window overlooking the street below, where a group of teenagers loitered near a corner store, and several storefronts stood empty with "Felice" signs. High unemployment, low educational attainment, limited resources. The statistics speak for themselves. Statistics tell only part of the story, Sophia countered. What they don't capture is the resilience, the creativity, the determination of the people here. She nodded toward the classroom. The woman in the red sweater. She's a single mother of 3 who makes artisanal soaps now sold in boutiques downtown. The older gentleman by the window. He was laid off after 30 years at a factory and is now building a home repair business. They don't lack ability, Mr. Reed. They lack opportunity. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from his CFO. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to answer. The news wasn't good. A major acquisition deal that had been months in the making was suddenly in jeopardy. The target company was considering an offer from Wayland Corp instead, his chief competitor. Alexander ended the call with a terse instruction to schedule an emergency meeting that afternoon. When he returned to Sophia, his mind was already shifting, back to the corporate battlefield where he felt most comfortable. "I need to cut this visit short. Something's come up." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. Of course, corporate emergencies take precedence over community tours. There was no malice in her tone, just a simple acknowledgement of his priorities. As they descended the stairs, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A teenage boy had burst through the doors, his face contorted with panic. "Ms. Chen, it's Darius. He's in trouble." Sophia immediately changed course, moving swiftly toward the boy, with Alexander following out of curiosity. "What happened, Jamal?" "Those guys from West Side," Jamal panted, his words tumbling out. "They cornered him behind the convenience store. They got knives, Miss Chen. I ran to get help." Sophia's expression hardened. "Call Officer Rivera," she instructed a staff member who had appeared at her side. "Tell him it's urgent." She turned to Alexander. "I'm sorry, but I need to handle this. Clara can reschedule our meeting if you're still interested in discussing the proposal." Without waiting for his response, Sophia grabbed a jacket from a nearby hook and headed for the door, the teenage boy at her heels. Alexander stood momentarily, frozen, caught off guard by the sudden shift from businesswoman to crisis responder. Something compelled him to follow. "What are you doing?" he asked himself as he hurried after Sophia into the damp street. The rain had stopped, but puddles still dotted the cracked sidewalk, reflecting the grey sky above. He caught up to Sophia half a block away. "Ms. Chen, wait. Shouldn't we call the police?" "We did," she replied without slowing her pace. "But Darius can't wait. He's one of our scholarship kids, headed to community college next fall. He's worked too hard to become another statistic." They rounded a corner into an alleyway behind a convenience store. There, pressed against a brick wall, stood a lanky young man in a school uniform, surrounded by 4 older teens in hoodies. One held a knife that gleamed dully in the overcast light. "Darius!" Sophia called out, her voice commanding. "Step away from him, now!" The knife wielder turned, his face twisting into a sneer. "Stay out of this, lady. This ain't your business." Alexander assessed the situation with rising alarm. The alley was narrow, the odds poor, and Sophia Chen, all 5'3" of her, was walking directly toward armed teenagers with nothing but stern disapproval as a weapon. "Actually, it is my business," Sophia replied calmly, continuing her approach. "Darius is in my college prep program. And you, Tyrell, if I remember correctly, turned down a spot in our vocational training last year. The offer still stands, by the way." The teen with the knife, Tyrell, faltered slightly, clearly surprised at being addressed by name. Alexander used the momentary distraction to step forward, placing himself slightly ahead of Sophia. The corporate world might be his natural habitat, but he'd grown up in Chicago's South Side before clawing his way to Harvard. He hadn't forgotten how to project the "don't mess with me" stance of his youth. "The police are on their way," Alexander said, his voice low and even. "You don't want to add assault charges to whatever else you're planning. Not worth it." Tyrell's eyes darted between Sophia and Alexander, then to the street behind them. The wail of a distant siren tipped the scales. "Whatever," he muttered, lowering the knife. "Come on," he said to his companions. "This fool ain't worth it. The group skulked away, disappearing around the corner. Darius sagged against the wall, his backpack clutched protectively against his chest. "You okay?" Sophia asked, quickly checking him for injuries. "I'm fine, Ms. Chen," Darius mumbled, embarrassment replacing fear. "They wanted my laptop, the one from the coding program." "We'll get you home," Sophia assured him, then glanced at Alexander with something like surprise in her eyes, as if seeing him anew. "Thank you for stepping in. That was unexpected." Alexander shrugged, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "It was nothing." A police cruiser pulled up at the end of the alley, and Officer Rivera, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair, approached. "Miss Chen," he greeted her with familiar respect. "Jamal said there was trouble." While Sophia explained the situation and Darius gave a description of his attackers, Alexander stood back, his thoughts churning. He had just intervened in a street confrontation, something the Alexander Reed, who had arrived at the community center an hour ago, would never have done. What had changed? Back at the center, after Darius had been safely escorted home by Officer Rivera, Sophia offered Alexander a cup of coffee in her cramped office. The space was functional rather than impressive. A desk covered with neatly organized papers, bookshelves filled with grant-writing guides and community development texts, and walls adorned with children's artwork and thank-you cards. "So," she said, settling into her chair, "that wasn't quite the tour I had planned." Alexander sipped the surprisingly good coffee. "Does that happen often?" "The neighborhood has its challenges," Sophia admitted. "But incidents like that have decreased by 40% since we started our youth intervention programs. Tyrell, the boy with the knife, he's on our outreach list. His older brother was in our programs before he went to prison. We're still trying to connect with Tyrell." Alexander set down his cup. "You know the names of kids who aren't even in your programs?" "Of course. They're all part of this community." She leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Reed, when you look at this neighborhood, you see statistics and balance sheets. I see Darius, who tutors younger kids in math while preparing for college. I see Mrs. Patel, who lost her husband last year but still volunteers to teach cooking. Glasses. I see Miguel, who's building a business while giving back." Alexander frowned. "Sentiment doesn't pay the bills, Ms. Chen. Your center may do good work, but if it can't sustain itself financially, all those programs disappear anyway." "I'm not denying the importance of financial sustainability," Sophia countered. "That's why my proposal includes a path to self-sufficiency through social enterprise initiatives. But there's a difference between demanding economic viability and extracting maximum profit from a community resource." Alexander's phone buzzed again, his executive team, no doubt wondering where he was. He ignored it, finding himself unexpectedly engaged in this conversation. "Walk me through the social enterprise component again." For the next 30 minutes, Sophia outlined a detailed plan to transform part of the center into a cafe and co-working space that would generate revenue while providing job training. The model was sound, with realistic projections and contingency. In plans, despite himself, Alexander was impressed. "You could have been a formidable corporate strategist," he commented when she finished. "I am a strategist," Sophia replied, with a hint of a smile. "Just for a different kind of bottom line." Alexander stood, suddenly aware of how long he'd stayed. "I need to get back to the office. I'll review your proposal in detail." Sophia walked him to the entrance. As they crossed the main hall, a small girl of about 6 broke away from the after-school group and ran up to Sophia, tugging at her cardigan. Miss Chen, look what I drew." She thrust a colorful paper toward Sophia with pride. Sophia knelt down to examine the drawing, a jumble of bright figures that might have been people standing around a large building. "It's beautiful, Lily. Is this the center?" The girl nodded vigorously. "That's you!" She pointed to a stick figure with black hair. "And that's me, and that's my mom, and that's everyone." Her small finger traced the crowd of figures surrounding the building. "I love it," Sophia said warmly. "May I keep it?" Lily beamed and handed over her masterpiece before running back to her group. Sophia stood, carefully adding the drawing to a folder. "Sorry about the interruption." "It's fine," Alexander said, though he was already mentally transitioning back to his pending corporate crisis. "I'll have my team contact you about the proposal." Outside, his driver waited with the black Lexus that seemed jarringly out of place. On the modest street, as Alexander reached for the door handle, a thought struck him. He turned back to Sophia. "Why did you invite me here today? You must have known a tour wouldn't change the financial realities." Sophia considered him for a moment. "Because numbers on a page don't tell the whole story, Mr. Reed, and because I believe that seeing something firsthand can change how you value it." She glanced back at the center, then met his eyes again. "Even the most profitable investments sometimes yield returns that can't be measured in dollars." Alexander nodded, unsure how to respond to the unexpected wisdom in her words. As his car pulled away from the curb, he found himself looking back at the community center with its bright mural and faded brick. Something had shifted during his brief visit, a subtle realignment of perspective that left him feeling strangely unsettled. Back at Vertex headquarters, Alexander plunged into crisis management. The potential acquisition was indeed in jeopardy, with Wayland Corp aggressively courting the target company's board. For hours, he strategized with his team, reworked financial models, and made calls to key stakeholders. It was past midnight when he finally returned to his penthouse apartment, exhausted but satisfied. They had salvaged the deal, at least temporarily. He poured himself a nightcap. Alexander's gaze fell on Sophia's proposal, which he had brought home to review. He picked it up, flipping through the meticulously prepared pages. Her business acumen was evident in every projection, every strategy. Yet she had chosen to apply those skills not to personal enrichment, but to community uplift. Alexander woke before dawn, his mind still churning with thoughts of the community center and its Harvard-educated director. Sophia Chen was an anomaly. He couldn't quite categorize. Brilliant yet humble, principled yet practical, she had challenged his assumptions not through confrontation, but by simply existing as a contradiction to his worldview. He dressed for his morning run, a ritual he maintained regardless of weather or workload. The streets were quiet as he pushed himself through a punishing 5 miles, the rhythm of his footfalls usually clearing his mind of distractions. Today, however, Sophia's words kept pace with him. "Not all value can be measured in dollars." Back in his apartment, Alexander showered and prepared for the day ahead. A series of high-stakes meetings awaited him at Vertex, yet he found himself opening his laptop to research community development models and social enterprise initiatives. By the time his driver arrived, he had filled a notepad with questions and observations. The morning passed in a blur of boardroom discussions about the endangered acquisition. Alexander performed flawlessly, his reputation for ruthless efficiency, on full display as he dissected the competition's offer and outlined countermeasures. Yet beneath this familiar role, something had shifted, a new lens through which he viewed the corporate chess match. During a break between meetings, he found himself in his office, staring at the city below. Boston sprawled before him, its affluent, downtown gleaming with glass towers, while the outlying neighborhoods, places like East Side, remained in the shadows. He had always seen this division as natural, inevitable even. Now he wasn't so sure. "Mr. Reed," Clara interrupted his thoughts, appearing in the doorway. "I have that information you requested on East Side Community Center." He motioned her in, accepting the folder she offered. "What did you find?" It's quite remarkable, actually, Clara said, uncharacteristic enthusiasm coloring her voice. Their impact metrics are impressive. 87% of their youth program participants graduate high school, compared to a district average of 62%. Their adult education programs have helped over 300 residents secure better employment in the past 2 years. Alexander skimmed the report as she spoke. What about their financial situation? That's the curious part, Clara continued. They're not mismanaged at all. Ms. Chen has actually grown their operating budget by 20% annually through grants and corporate partnerships. The rent increase is simply too substantial to absorb all at once, especially since they've been expanding services to meet community needs. And Sophia Chen herself? Clara hesitated. There's not much beyond what you already know. Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs. Then she returned to her childhood neighborhood. She lives modestly, a small apartment near the center. No family except... She trailed off, flipping through her notes. Except, Alexander prompted. A younger brother, Jason Chen. He's a sophomore at MIT on scholarship, studying computer science. Apparently Ms. Chen has been his legal guardian since their parents died. Alexander recalled Sophia's words about the community raising her after her parents' death. The pieces were starting to fit together. Her dedication to the center wasn't just professional, it was personal. There's one more thing, Clara added. When I was researching, I found this. She handed him a business magazine from 3 years ago. On the cover was a younger Sophia Chen, dressed in corporate attire, under the headline, Rising Star, the analyst changing how Wall Street views social impact. Alexander studied the image, then flipped to the article. It detailed Sophia's pioneering work at Goldman Sachs, where she had developed a new framework for measuring the financial benefits of corporate social responsibility. Work that had saved clients millions while improving community outcomes. She could be making 7 figures. Alexander murmured, more to himself than to Clara. At least, Clara agreed. Several executive recruiters have mentioned trying to lure her back to the corporate world. She's declined every offer. After Clara left, Alexander sat with the information, turning it over in his mind. Sophia Chen had options, lucrative ones, yet she chose to fight for a community center in a struggling neighborhood. The question was why? His contemplation was interrupted by a call from the legal team. The acquisition target was wavering, leaning toward Wayland Corp's offer. He needed to act quickly. Schedule a dinner with their CEO, Alexander instructed. Tonight, if possible, and have my driver ready in 20 minutes. There's something I need to do first. Rain had begun to fall again as Alexander's car pulled up to East Side Community Center. The afternoon programs were in full swing, the building humming with activity. He spotted Sophia in the main hall, deep in conversation with an elderly volunteer, a spreadsheet open between them. She looked up as he approached, surprise evident in her expression. Mr. Reed, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Do you have a moment to talk? He asked, acutely aware of the curious glances from those nearby. Sophia nodded, leading him to her office and closing the door. Is this about the proposal? Partly, Alexander admitted, taking the seat she offered. I've reviewed it thoroughly. Your financial projections are solid, but I have questions about the implementation timeline. For the next half hour, they discussed the details of her plan, the phased rent increase, the social enterprise component, the metrics for success. Sophia answered each question with precision and insight, never defensive, always substantive. It was like negotiating with a peer, Alexander realized, not a supplicant. Your proposal has merit, he finally said, but I'm still troubled by the underlying model. Community centers like this one operate on the margins, constantly scrambling for grants and donations. It's not sustainable. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying him. What would you suggest instead? The question caught him off guard. He had expected resistance, perhaps even righteous indignation. Instead, She was asking for his input. Genuinely, it seemed. A more robust social enterprise component, he said after a moment. Not just a cafe, but perhaps a tech incubator leveraging the skills of people like Miguel. The neighborhood has untapped talent that could generate significant revenue, if properly channeled. Sophia's eyes lit up with interest. We've actually been exploring something similar. Several of our micro-enterprise graduates have expressed interest in shared workspace and resources. The challenge is startup capital. That's where a strategic partner could make a difference, Alexander found himself saying. Someone with business expertise and connections to potential clients. Someone like Vertex Industries, Sophia asked, a hint of skepticism in her tone. Alexander shrugged, surprised by his own train of thought. Perhaps it would need to make business sense, of course. Of course, Sophia echoed, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. Though I'm curious why the CEO of Vertex is personally exploring community investment strategies. Isn't that usually delegated to a CSR team? The question was polite but pointed. Alexander considered deflecting, but found himself responding honestly instead. I'm intrigued by your approach, Ms. Chen. You've applied Harvard Business School principles to nonprofit management in ways I haven't seen before. It's intellectually interesting. Just intellectually? Sophia challenged gently. Alexander felt an unfamiliar discomfort, as though she could see past his carefully constructed persona. What other interest would there be? Human interest, perhaps? The satisfaction of creating value beyond shareholder returns? She gestured to the wall behind her, where dozens of thank you cards from community members were pinned to a bulletin board. These are my performance metrics, Mr. Reed. They don't fit neatly into quarterly reports, but they matter. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his CFO. The dinner with the acquisition target's CEO was confirmed for 7 o'clock. I need to go, he said, standing, but I'd like to continue this conversation. There may be a mutually beneficial arrangement we haven't yet explored. Sophia rose as well. I'm open to that, though I should be clear, the center's mission won't be compromised. We serve this community first and foremost. I wouldn't expect anything less, Alexander replied, surprised to find he meant it. As he turned to leave, a framed photograph on Sophia's desk caught his eye. It showed a teenage Sophia with a young boy standing before what appeared to be a science fair project. The boy, presumably her brother Jason, beamed with pride, a blue ribbon pinned to his display. Your brother? Alexander asked, nodding toward the photo. Sophia's expression softened. Yes, that's Jason, his first regional science fair win. He was 12. And you were raising him alone? With help from this community, she corrected. Mrs. Williams tutored him in English. Mr. Jackson taught him programming on that ancient computer I mentioned. The center was our safety net when we had nothing else. Alexander absorbed this, seeing the community center in a new light, not just as a collection of programs, but as a lifeline for people like Sophia and Jason. I'll be in touch about the proposal, he said, suddenly eager to step back from the uncomfortable empathy rising within him. That evening, over an elegant dinner at one of Boston's finest restaurants, Alexander negotiated masterfully with the EU CEO of the acquisition target. By dessert, he had secured a verbal commitment to move forward with Vertex's offer rather than Wayland Corp's. It was a significant victory, one that would add millions to Vertex's bottom line and further cement Alexander's reputation as a corporate shark. Yet as he returned to his penthouse, he felt strangely hollow. The thrill of the deal seemed muted compared to the energy he had felt discussing social enterprise models with Sophia earlier that day. His phone chimed with a message from Clara. Wayland Corp CEO spotted having drinks with Jason Chen at the Bristol Lounge. Alexander froze, rereading the message. Jason Chen, Sophia's brother, the MIT sophomore. What would Victor Wayland want with a college student? Unless... He quickly pulled up Jason Chen's information on his laptop. Computer science major, specializing in machine learning, top of his class. Recently published a paper on algorithmic efficiency that had caught the attention of several tech companies. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. Wayland wasn't just competing for the acquisition, he was going after Vertex's proprietary trading algorithm, the crown jewel of their financial services division. An algorithm that could be significantly enhanced by the type of efficiency improvements Jason Chen was pioneering. If Wayland secured both the acquisition and Jason's research, Vertex would be vulnerable. The algorithm that gave them their competitive edge in high-frequency trading would be at risk. Alexander paced his living room, mind racing. Was Sophia aware of this connection? Was her approach to him about the community center just a coincidence, or part of a larger strategy orchestrated by Wayland? No, he decided after careful consideration. Sophia's commitment to the center was genuine. Her history there predated any corporate interest in her brother's research. But she might not be aware that Wayland was courting Jason, potentially using the young man to gain access to Vertex's proprietary technology. Alexander poured himself a bourbon, weighing his options. The ruthless businessman in him saw an opportunity to leverage this situation, to make the community center's future contingent on Jason Chen's exclusive partnership with Vertex. It would be a clean, efficient solution to both problems. Yet something held him back. The image of Sophia kneeling to accept a child's drawing, of her walking fearlessly toward armed teenagers to protect her student, of her choosing a modest office over a corner suite at Goldman Sachs. These didn't align with someone who would respond well to corporate blackmail. There had to be another approach, one that honored the integrity he had witnessed in Sophia while still protecting Vertex's interests. Alexander picked up Sophia's proposal again, flipping through the pages until he reached the section on long-term sustainability. Perhaps the answer lay not in confrontation, but in collaboration. Morning light streamed through the windows of Alexander's office. As he reviewed the documents spread across his desk, he had arrived at Vertex headquarters at 5 a.m., determined to resolve both the acquisition deal and the community center situation before the day's end. His executive team would arrive for an emergency meeting in an hour, but first he needed clarity on exactly what was at stake. The report from Vertex's security team confirmed his suspicions. Victor Wayland had been systematically targeting key personnel and technologies that could undermine Vertex's market position. Jason Chen's research on algorithmic efficiency wasn't just academically impressive, it potentially held the key to outperforming Vertex's trading system, the company's most valuable asset. A separate folder contained everything Alexander had, gathered on the East Side Community Center: impact reports, financial statements, and Sophia's innovative proposal. He had spent half the night developing an alternative approach, one that might serve multiple interests simultaneously. Clara knocked lightly before entering with his coffee. "The executive team will be ready at 7, and I've scheduled Ms. Chen for 9:30 as requested." Alexander nodded, taking the coffee. "Has there been any update on the Wayland situation?" "Yes, sir. Victor Wayland has invited Jason Chen to tour their R&D facility this afternoon. Our sources indicate they're preparing to offer him a significant research grant and potential employment after graduation. And the acquisition target? Still verbally committed to us, but their board meets at noon to make the final decision. Wayland has apparently sweetened their offer overnight." Alexander dismissed Clara with a thank you, turning back to his preparations. By the time his executive team arrived, he had formulated a strategy that was unconventional by Vertex standards, but potentially transformative. The meeting was tense, with several executives openly questioning Alexander's approach. Eleanor Blackwood, his hard-nosed CFO, was particularly vocal. "Let me understand this," she said, tapping her pen against the conference table. "You want to establish a technology incubator at a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods and commit Vertex to a 5-year lease at below-market rates? Have you considered the shareholder response?" "I've considered everything, Eleanor," Alexander replied coolly. "This isn't charity. It's strategic positioning. The incubator gives us first access to emerging talent and innovations, particularly in markets we've struggled to penetrate. It also creates positive brand association in communities where Wayland is attempting to establish dominance." Marcus Teller, head of legal, leaned forward. "And you believe this will help secure both the acquisition and protect our trading algorithm?" "It addresses multiple objectives simultaneously," Alexander confirmed. "But it only works if we move quickly. I need the board's approval by noon." The discussion continued, with Alexander methodically addressing each concern raised. He wasn't asking for permission so much as alignment. His position as CEO gave him authority to proceed regardless, but he needed his team's support for effective implementation. By 8:30, he had secured reluctant consensus. The executive team dispersed to prepare the necessary documentation and board presentations, leaving Alexander alone to prepare for his meeting with Sophia. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in a simple blue blazer over a white blouse and dark slacks, professional but unpretentious. Alexander noted that despite her modest attire, she carried herself with the natural confidence of someone who had navigated both boardrooms and back alleys with equal competence. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he greeted her, gesturing toward the sitting area in his office rather than the more formal conference table. Sophia took a seat, her expression curious but guarded. "Your assistant said it was urgent. I assume it's about our proposal." "Yes, but with a significant modification." Alexander handed her a folder. "This is my counter-proposal. I'd like you to review it now, if you don't mind." Sophia opened the folder, her eyes widening slightly as she scanned the contents. Alexander watched her carefully, noting the precise moment when surprise gave way to analytical focus. She read quickly but thoroughly, occasionally pausing to examine a financial projection or implementation timeline. "This is unexpected," she finally said, looking up. "A technology incubator housed at Eastside, with Vertex as the anchor tenant and strategic partner. Guaranteed rent stability for 10 years, with options for community ownership after the 5th year, plus a job training pipeline and direct investment in the center's existing programs." She closed the folder. "What prompted this dramatic shift in approach, Mr. Reed?" Alexander considered his response carefully. The truth was complicated, involving Jason Chen's research, Wayland's competitive maneuvers, and his own evolving perspective. But beneath these factors lay a simpler reality he was only beginning to acknowledge. "You did," he said finally. "Your Harvard MBA isn't what impressed me, Ms. Chen. It's what you chose to do with it." Sophia studied him, clearly searching for the hidden angle. "This proposal is generous, but it also benefits Vertex substantially. You gain access to untapped talent, tax incentives, and community goodwill." "Precisely," Alexander nodded. "It's not philanthropy, it's mutual value creation. The kind you've been advocating since your Goldman Sachs days, if that business magazine article about you is accurate." A flicker of a smile crossed Sophia's face. "You've been researching me." "Know your negotiating partner," Alexander replied with a slight shrug. "Standard business practice." "And is that all this is? A business negotiation?" The question hung in the air between them, deceptively simple, yet loaded with implication. Alexander found himself unusually hesitant to respond. 3 days ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, he admitted. Now I'm not sure. Your community center has challenged certain assumptions. Sophia leaned forward slightly. Which assumptions, exactly? That success and social impact are mutually exclusive. That communities like Eastside are drains on resources rather than potential sources of innovation. He paused. That a Harvard MBA would choose a cramped office in a former factory over a corner suite on Wall Street without ulterior motives. I have motives, Sophia said quietly. They're just not the ones typically valued in your world. I'm beginning to understand that, Alexander acknowledged. Which brings me to the other reason I asked you here today. He hesitated, then decided on directness. Are you aware that Victor Wayland has been recruiting your brother? Sophia's expression shifted from surprise to wariness. Jason mentioned meeting some executives from Wayland Corp at a campus recruitment event. They were interested in his research. Why? Alexander explained the situation concisely, how Jason's work on algorithmic efficiency could potentially compromise Vertex's trading systems, how Wayland was simultaneously trying to outmaneuver them on a key acquisition, and how the timing of it all seemed suspiciously coordinated. So this proposal, Sophia said when he finished, tapping the folder, is it contingent on Jason turning down Wayland's offer? No, Alexander replied firmly. The proposal stands on its own merits. I'm telling you about Wayland because you and Jason should have all the information before he makes a decision. Wayland has a history of exploiting researchers and discarding them once they've extracted what they need. Sophia was silent for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly processing the implications. Why should I believe you're any different? Your reputation isn't exactly built on compassion, Mr. Reed. The question was fair. Alexander had built his career on tough negotiation and relentless efficiency, often at the expense of sentimentality. I'm not asking you to trust my character, he said carefully. I'm asking you to evaluate the proposal on its terms. It creates mutual accountability. Vertex's commitment is legally binding and transparent. Sophia reopened the folder, reviewing the details with renewed scrutiny. The technology incubator would provide resources for local entrepreneurs like Miguel. Yes, with Vertex engineers offering mentorship and technical support. We'd also establish a coding academy for neighborhood youth, with scholarships to technical colleges for graduates. And the existing programs, the after-school care, adult education, food assistance, preserved and expanded, Alexander confirmed. Your leadership team would maintain operational control, with increased funding through a dedicated community foundation. Sophia closed the folder again, her decision apparently made. I need to discuss this with my board and the community stakeholders, and I should talk to Jason, not to dissuade him from Wayland, but to ensure he has complete information. Of course, Alexander agreed. But time is a factor. Wayland is moving quickly and our board votes on the acquisition strategy at noon. I understand, Sophia said, rising. I'll have an answer for you by 11. After she left, Alexander turned his attention to the acquisition situation. The target company's CEO was wavering despite their verbal agreement, tempted by Wayland's enhanced offer. Alexander spent the next hour on the phone, leveraging relationships and making carefully calibrated promises to shore up their position. At 10:45, Clara appeared at his door. Ms. Chen is on line 1. Alexander picked up the phone, his pulse quickening slightly. Ms. Chen, have you reached a decision? I've spoken with our key stakeholders, Sophia replied, her voice businesslike but warm. We're prepared to move forward with your proposal, with 2 conditions. I'm listening. First, we want community representation on the incubator's governance. Board, people from the neighborhood who understand its needs and potential. Reasonable, Alexander agreed. And the second, a personal commitment from you to remain involved, not just as Vertex's CEO, but as an individual. Regular visits, mentorship, direct engagement. This can't be a project you hand off to your CSR team once the press release goes out. The request surprised him. May I ask why? There was a brief pause before Sophia answered. Because you've shown capacity for growth, Mr. Reed. The center needs Vertex's resources, but the youth in our programs could benefit from seeing someone like you, someone who came from modest beginnings, but succeeded without losing their humanity. Alexander was momentarily speechless. He had never framed his own journey in those terms, had never considered himself a potential role model beyond business acumen. I accept your conditions, he said finally. Then we have an agreement. I'll have our attorney review the contracts this afternoon. And Jason, Alexander couldn't help asking. I've shared what you told me, Sophia replied. He's doing his own research on both companies now. He's always been thorough that way. But I should mention, he's particularly interested in applied AI ethics, not just efficiency algorithms. The right project might interest him more than the highest bidder. After they hung up, Alexander sat back in his chair, absorbing the implications of their conversation. Sophia had skillfully redirected what could have been a purely transactional negotiation into something more meaningful, a partnership that required genuine commitment rather than just financial investment. His intercom buzzed. The board is assembled in the main conference room, sir, Clara announced. And I have an update on Wayland. He's issued a press release claiming a breakthrough in trading technology that will revolutionize the industry. A bluff, Alexander said with certainty. He doesn't have anything concrete yet. He's trying to spook our shareholders and the acquisition target. He gathered his presentation materials. Send our team the updated proposal incorporating the community center partnership. Frame it as a strategic technology incubator with significant competitive advantages. The board meeting was contentious, with several older members openly skeptical of the community partnership. Alexander defended the strategy with uncharacteristic passion, presenting it not as a charitable endeavor, but as a forward-thinking approach to talent acquisition and market differentiation. Wayland is trying to buy innovation, he concluded. We're proposing to nurture it organically in communities we've previously overlooked. The financial projections are sound, the PR benefits substantial, and the competitive advantage is clear. The vote was close, 7-5 in favor, but it was enough. Alexander left the boardroom with authorization to proceed on both the acquisition and the community center partnership. As he walked back to his office, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, satisfaction that went beyond the usual thrill of victory. This win somehow meant more. His phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Jason Chen here. Sophia gave me your contact. Interested in discussing ethical AI applications in financial systems. Available tomorrow afternoon? Alexander smiled, typing a response. Tomorrow works. Bring your ideas. Lunch at Vertex. I'll send details. He had just set down his phone when Clara appeared, looking uncharacteristically concerned. Sir, there's a situation at the community center. Apparently there was a fire in the electrical room. No injuries reported, but significant damage to the east wing. Ms. Chen is handling the immediate response, but asked me to inform you. Alexander's driver broke several speed limits racing across Boston to the East Side Community Center. Smoke was still visible from blocks away, a grey plume rising into the afternoon sky. Fire trucks blocked the street, their red lights flashing against the brick buildings. Yellow caution tape cordoned off the area, held by police officers who directed onlookers to maintain their distance. Alexander approached the nearest officer, his usual commanding presence clearing a path. I need to speak with Sophia Chen, he said, showing his ID. I'm Alexander Reed, CEO of Vertex Industries. We're partners with the center. The officer studied him briefly, then lifted the tape, She's with the fire chief around back. As Alexander made his way through the chaos, the damage became visible. The eastern wing of the building, where the adult education classrooms and computer lab were housed, had suffered the worst of it. Blackened windows gaped like hollow eyes, and the acrid smell of burnt wiring and melted plastic hung in the air. He found Sophia in intense conversation with a firefighter in a white helmet. Her clothes were smudged with soot, her hair pulled back hastily, but her demeanor remained composed as she gestured toward the building. "The electrical system was scheduled for upgrade next month," she was saying. "We knew it was outdated, but the inspection didn't flag it as an immediate hazard." "Old wiring in these buildings is always a risk," the fire chief replied. "Initial assessment suggests it started in the main electrical panel. Could have been much worse if your maintenance person hadn't responded so quickly with the fire suppression system." Sophia nodded, making a note on a tablet that had clearly seen better days. "When can we access the space to evaluate the damage?" "Tomorrow at the earliest. We need to ensure structural integrity first." The chief noticed Alexander and paused. "Someone here for you, Ms. Chen." Sophia turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Reed, I didn't expect you to come personally." "Clara mentioned the fire. I wanted to see the situation firsthand." Alexander surveyed the damage with a practiced eye. "How extensive is it?" "The East Wing is a loss. That's the computer lab, 3 classrooms, and the food pantry storage," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the evident strain. "The main hall and West Wing were spared, thank goodness, but we'll need to relocate. Several programs immediately." The fire chief excused himself to oversee the final containment efforts, leaving Sophia and Alexander standing amid the controlled chaos of emergency responders. "What do you need most urgently?" Alexander asked, already mentally cataloguing Vertex resources that could be deployed. Sophia ran a hand through her hair, leaving a smudge of ash on her forehead. "Temporary space for the programs. We have over 50 adult learners in GED and ESL classes that meet daily. Plus, the computer lab serves job seekers and students. The food pantry distribution is scheduled for tomorrow. We have families counting on those groceries." A small commotion near the center's entrance caught their attention. A group of children and teenagers had gathered, watching the scene with wide eyes. Among them was Darius, the young man Alexander had met during the alley confrontation. He broke away from the group, jogging toward Sophia. "Ms. Chen, we came as soon as we heard," he called out. "The robotics team is here. We want to help." Sophia's expression softened at the sight of the teenager. "Thanks, Darius, but I don't think there's much you can do right now. The building isn't safe to enter. We don't need to go inside," Darius insisted. "We can help coordinate with the other students, set up a communication system. Miguel's already created an update page for everyone." Alexander watched this exchange with interest. The boy he had seen terrified in an alley just days ago now stood tall, eager to contribute in a crisis. Behind him, the other teenagers, presumably the robotics team, waited expectantly, tablets and phones at the ready. "Actually," Alexander interjected, "your team might be exactly what we need." He turned to Sophia. "How quickly can you compile a list of all affected programs, their requirements and participants?" Sophia blinked, shifting mental gears. "I have most of it accessible on our cloud system." "Why?" "Because we're going to relocate everything by tomorrow morning." Alexander pulled out his phone, sending a rapid series of texts to Clara. "Vertex has a training facility on the 2nd floor of our downtown office that's not scheduled for use this month. It has 30 workstations, 3 meeting rooms, and high-speed internet. We can set up temporary classrooms there. Downtown is too far for many of our participants," Sophia pointed out. "Transportation, we'll arrange shuttle service from here to downtown," Alexander cut in. "And for the food pantry, we can use the loading dock and conference room at our warehouse facility. It's only 6 blocks from here." Darius stepped forward, eyes bright with purpose. The robotics team can help coordinate. We have everyone's contact information in our competition database. Alexander nodded to the teenager. Perfect. You'll work with my assistant Clara. She's on her way here now. Your team will be our communications hub, letting everyone know about the temporary arrangements. For a moment, Sophia simply stared at him, a complex emotion crossing her face. Then she nodded decisively. Let's make it happen. The next few hours unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Clara arrived with a team from Vertex, setting up a command center in a coffee shop across from the community center. Darius and the robotics team proved remarkably efficient, creating a digital check-in system for program participants and organizing phone trees to reach those without internet access. Alexander worked alongside Sophia, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as they configured the temporary spaces. He made calls to Vertex department heads, rearranging schedules and reallocating resources with the same intensity he typically reserved for major acquisitions. By evening, a comprehensive plan was in place. Shuttle vans were secured. The training facility was being reconfigured for multiple uses. The warehouse was preparing to receive food deliveries. Volunteers had been mobilized to assist with the transition. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. As night fell, the emergency vehicles finally departed, leaving the damaged community center standing silent and dark. Sophia and Alexander sat on a bench across the street, exhausted but satisfied with the day's accomplishments. "Thank you," Sophia said simply, accepting the coffee Alexander had procured from the shop behind them. "This response goes well beyond our partnership agreement." Alexander sipped his own coffee, surprised to find he preferred this basic brew to his usual premium blend. "The agreement isn't officially signed yet," he pointed out. "This is just good business, ensuring continuity for a valuable community asset." Sophia gave him a sidelong glance, clearly not buying the explanation. "Is that what you'll tell your board?" "Among other things," he admitted with a slight smile, "though I suspect they'll be more interested in the media coverage this will generate." Vertex CEO leads community center rescue makes for good press. "Cynical but pragmatic," Sophia observed. "Though I'm beginning to think there's more to your motivations than corporate image." Alexander contemplated the darkened community center, considering her words. The truth was, his own actions today had surprised him. The Alexander Reed of a week ago would have delegated the crisis response, perhaps authorized some financial assistance, but certainly wouldn't have spent hours personally coordinating logistics or arranging shuttle services. "I had a conversation with Jason this afternoon," he said, instead of addressing her observation directly. "Impressive young man. His approach to ethical constraints in AI systems is genuinely innovative." "He mentioned that," Sophia nodded. "Said you offered him a summer research position with complete ownership of his intellectual property," Alexander confirmed, "and a fellowship to complete his graduate studies, significantly different from Wayland's approach, which was standard corporate exploitation, all IP rights transferred to the company, restrictive covenants, minimal academic freedom." Alexander finished his coffee. Jason was smart enough to read the fine print. Sophia studied him carefully. "And your offer? What's the catch there?" "No catch. Just appropriate compensation for valuable work, with ethical guardrails we both agree are necessary." Alexander met her gaze directly. "Contrary to what you might think, Ms. Chen, I do understand the difference between exploitation and fair exchange. Recent evidence suggests you do," she acknowledged. "Though your reputation is based on decisions I made to survive and succeed in a cutthroat industry." Alexander completed her thought. but reputations can be incomplete pictures. A comfortable silence fell between them. In the distance, the city continued its rhythmic pulse of traffic and nightlife, but here, in the shadow of the damaged community center, they existed in a momentary bubble of shared purpose. "What made you choose this path?" Alexander asked finally. "You could have continued at Goldman Sachs, made partner by now. Instead, you came back here." Sophia contemplated the question, her expression thoughtful. "Do you know what scared me most about corporate success? How easy it was to become isolated from reality, to start seeing people as data points or cost centers. I watched brilliant colleagues lose touch with the human impact of their decisions." She gestured toward the community center. "Here, I'm connected to real people with real needs. Every decision I make has visible consequences. There's an accountability you don't find in corporate boardrooms. And your brother? Taking him from this environment to MIT? That couldn't have been easy." "One of the hardest things I've ever done," Sophia admitted. "But Jason has gifts that needed nurturing beyond what Eastside could provide. The community understood that. They helped raise money for his application fees, celebrated when he got the scholarship. They saw his success as their success too." Alexander nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "That's what you're building here. A community that lifts each other up rather than competing for limited resources." "Exactly," Sophia said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "It's not about charity or handouts. It's about creating systems where everyone can contribute and everyone can benefit, much like your technology incubator concept, just with different metrics for success." Their conversation was interrupted by Clara, who approached with tablet in hand. "Mr. Reed, the training facility setup is complete. The IT team has installed the necessary software for the adult education programs, and the shuttle service is confirmed for 7 a.m. tomorrow." She handed him the tablet. "These are the final logistics for your approval." Alexander reviewed the details, making a few adjustments before returning the tablet. "Excellent work, Clara. Please ensure the food pantry. Distribution has additional staff tomorrow. I anticipate higher than usual demand, given the circumstances." "Already arranged, sir. Is there anything else?" Alexander glanced at Sophia, then back to his assistant. "Yes. Contact our construction division first thing tomorrow. I want a complete structural assessment of the community center and preliminary renovation plans by end of day." After Clara departed, Sophia turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Renovation plans? The insurance claim hasn't even been processed yet." "Insurance will cover basic repairs, but not the upgrades the building actually needs," Alexander pointed out. "Consider this an acceleration of our partnership timeline. The East Wing reconstruction will incorporate the technology incubator design from our proposal." Sophia shook her head slightly, a mixture of disbelief and amusement crossing her features. "You don't waste time, do you?" "Time is the one resource we can't generate more of," Alexander replied. "And frankly, this community has waited long enough for proper investment." The following morning, Alexander arrived at the Vertex training facility before 7, wanting to ensure everything was ready for the community center's displaced programs. He found Sophia already there, working with a team of volunteers to arrange the space for maximum efficiency. "You're early," she commented, as he joined her, both of them now dressed in casual clothes, better suited to the day's activities. "So are you," he countered, helping her move a computer station to a more accessible position. "Couldn't sleep," Sophia admitted. "Too many logistics running through my mind." The first shuttle arrived promptly at 7:30, bringing a group of elderly ESL students who entered the corporate facility with wide eyes and hesitant steps. Sophia greeted each by name, guiding them to the classroom setup with gentle reassurance. Alexander observed the interaction, noting how Sophia's presence immediately put them at ease. She switched effortlessly between English, Spanish, and what sounded like Mandarin, her genuine warmth transcending language barriers. Throughout the morning, more participants arrived, job seekers for the computer lab, young adults for GED classes, community college students who relied on the center's resources. Each was welcomed, oriented, and integrated into the temporary space with remarkable efficiency. By midday, the facility hummed with productive activity. Alexander moved through the space, not directing but observing, occasionally stepping in to assist when needed. He found himself in conversation with Mr. Jackson, the elderly computer instructor he had met during his tour of the center. "Quite a setup you have here, Mr. Reed," the old man commented, looking around the high-tech training room. "Our students haven't had access to equipment this new, well, ever." Alexander considered the aging instructor's observation, the words triggering a realization that had been forming unconsciously since his first visit to Eastside. "These computers will be replaced with newer models next quarter," he said. "There's no reason the current ones couldn't be permanently relocated to the center after the renovation." Mr. Jackson's eyes twinkled behind thick glasses. "That would be something, wouldn't it? Our students could complete certification programs twice as fast with equipment like this." He adjusted his cardigan, a garment that had clearly seen decades of wear. "Though I might need some training myself on these newer systems, we have a corporate training staff who could assist with that transition," Alexander replied, already making mental notes. "In fact, a knowledge exchange program could benefit both sides." As they continued discussing possibilities, Alexander noticed Sophia across the room, deep in conversation with a group of young mothers whose children played nearby under volunteer supervision. Despite the crisis of the past 24 hours, she appeared remarkably composed, focused entirely on addressing their concerns. Mr. Jackson followed his gaze. "She's something special, that one," he commented. "Reminds me of her mother. Same quiet strength. Same refusal to accept limitations." "You knew her mother?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious about Sophia's background. "Oh yes, Grace Chen was one of our first ESL teachers, back when the center was just getting started. Brilliant woman, came from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a dream of education for her children." The old man's expression grew wistful. "When she and her husband died in that car accident, the whole community felt it. Sophia was barely out of college, suddenly responsible for a teenage brother. Yet, she still went to Harvard, worked at Goldman Sachs," Alexander observed, "while raising Jason and sending money back to support center programs." Mr. Jackson confirmed. "Never saw anyone work so hard. When she finally came back to take over the center, we all knew it was where she belonged, though some of us worried she was sacrificing too much." Alexander absorbed this information, adding layers to his understanding of Sophia Chen. She hadn't merely chosen a different path from the corporate world. She had simultaneously navigated both worlds, carrying responsibilities few executives would comprehend. His contemplation was interrupted by a call from Clara. The situation at the warehouse food pantry distribution had become chaotic, with nearly twice the expected number of families arriving for assistance. The temporary space was overwhelmed. "I'll head over there now," Alexander told her, already moving toward the exit. He caught Sophia's eye across the room, gesturing to indicate his departure. She nodded, then returned her attention to the young mothers, unaware of the new challenge that had arisen. The warehouse facility sat 6 blocks from the community center, a utilitarian building usually used for storing Vertex's non-digital assets. Alexander arrived to find a line stretching around the block. Elderly residents, families with children, individuals of all ages waiting patiently for food assistance. Inside, the volunteer team was struggling to maintain order as they distributed pre-packaged groceries. The space, while large, hadn't been configured efficiently for this purpose, creating bottlenecks in the process. "Mr. Reed," A harried volunteer greeted him. "We've got over 300 families here, and only enough prepackaged supplies for half that number." Alexander assessed the situation quickly, his corporate efficiency kicking in. "Show me your inventory and distribution process." After a brief review, he restructured the operation on the spot, reorganizing the space to create multiple distribution lines, reassigning volunteers to specific tasks, and calling in additional Vertex staff to assist. He contacted the company's regular food service vendor, arranging an emergency delivery of staples to supplement the dwindling supplies. "Create an assembly line here," he instructed, pointing to an empty area. "As the new supplies arrive, we'll build additional packages. No one leaves empty-handed today." For the next 3 hours, Alexander worked alongside community volunteers, perspiring through his casual button-down as he hefted boxes and directed traffic. The warehouse transformed into an efficient distribution center, processing families through the system with dignity and care. Midway through the afternoon, Sophia arrived, clearly surprised to find Alexander personally involved in the operation. She joined him at the assembly line, packing grocery bags without comment until there was a brief lull in the action. "Your assistant called me," she explained, wiping her brow. She seemed shocked that the CEO of Vertex Industries was hauling boxes of canned goods. Alexander handed her a bottle of water from a nearby cooler. "I grew up stocking shelves in my uncle's grocery store on Chicago's South Side. This is familiar territory." Sophia accepted the water, studying him with new interest. "You never mentioned that before." "It wasn't relevant to our negotiations," he replied simply. "And now?" Alexander considered the question as they both watched volunteers helping an elderly woman navigate the distribution line. "Now it seems relevant to understanding why this matters," he said finally. "My uncle's store was the only reliable food source in our neighborhood. When he had to close after a robbery, 30 square blocks became a food desert overnight." Sophia nodded, the shared understanding passing between them, requiring no additional explanation. They returned to work side by side, completing the distribution as the afternoon sun began its descent. By evening, the crisis had stabilized. The training facility programs were running smoothly. The food distribution had served every family, and preliminary assessment teams had begun evaluating the damaged community center. Alexander and Sophia found themselves once again seated across from each other, this time in a small diner near the warehouse. "I've been thinking about our partnership structure," Alexander said after they had ordered. "The current proposal is sound, but it doesn't fully leverage the potential synergies." Sophia raised an eyebrow, her exhaustion momentarily eclipsed by curiosity. "What did you have in mind?" "A more integrated approach." Alexander pulled out his tablet, opening a revised proposal he had been developing between crisis management tasks. "Rather than Vertex simply acting as a tenant and funder, we establish a joint educational institute, formally accredited, offering technical certification programs with direct pathways to employment." Sophia accepted the tablet, reviewing the proposal with careful attention. This would require significant additional investment. Yes, but with correspondingly higher returns, both financial and social. Alexander leaned forward slightly. "The community gets advanced educational opportunities and job placement. Vertex gets a talent pipeline customized to our technical needs. Both sides win." "And governance?" Sophia asked, cutting to a potential sticking point. "Equal representation, with community members holding key positions." Alexander had anticipated this concern. "I'm proposing something genuinely collaborative, Ms. Chen, not a corporate takeover disguised as community investment." Sophia handed back the tablet, her expression thoughtful. "It's ambitious, more than I expected." "Too ambitious?" Alexander challenged gently. "No," she replied after a moment, "just unexpected, Most corporate partners want to minimize involvement while maximizing PR value. This level of integration suggests a longer-term commitment. That's precisely what I'm proposing, Alexander. Confirmed. A decade minimum with structured evaluation points and expansion options. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Alexander observed Sophia's expression shifting between analytical assessment and cautious optimism. He had seen the same expression in countless boardroom negotiations, but never with the undercurrent of genuine care that characterized her approach. "The Community Council will have questions," she said finally. "Concerns about maintaining the center's identity and independence." "Valid concerns," Alexander acknowledged. "I'm open to adjustments that preserve the core mission while enhancing capabilities." Sophia nodded slowly. "I'll present it to them tomorrow. But I think—" She was interrupted by her phone buzzing insistently. Checking the screen, her expression immediately tightened with concern. "It's Darius. There's a situation at the center." They arrived at the damaged community center 15 minutes later to find a tense standoff. A group of teenagers, including Darius and several members of the robotics team, faced off against 3 men in expensive suits who stood before a black SUV with Wayland Corp's distinctive logo on the door. "What's happening?" Sophia asked, approaching the group with Alexander close behind. Darius turned, relief evident on his face. "Ms. Chen, these guys showed up saying they're from Wayland Corp. They're taking pictures and measurements of the building, saying something about acquisition and redevelopment." Victor Wayland himself stepped forward from beside the SUV, his tailored appearance contrasting sharply with the gritty streetscape. "Ms. Chen, how fortunate. I was hoping to speak with you." "Directly." His gaze shifted to Alexander, a calculated smile forming. "And Alexander Reed as well. This is convenient. What are you doing at our community center, Victor?" Alexander's voice carried the cool authority that had intimidated countless business rivals. "Simply exploring an opportunity," Wayland replied, smoothly. "I understand this unfortunate building suffered significant damage. My company is prepared to make an offer for the property. A generous one that would allow the center to relocate to more suitable facilities." Sophia crossed her arms. "The center isn't for sale, Mr. Wayland, and you're trespassing on private property." "Actually," Wayland countered, "I've been speaking with the property management company that holds the lease. They're quite interested in our offer, especially given the substantial renovation costs they're now facing." He handed Sophia a business card. "We're prepared to offer triple the market value, plus relocation assistance for your programs." Alexander watched Sophia's expression, noting the momentary flash of alarm before her professional composure reasserted itself. The property management company was a complication he hadn't anticipated. While the center operated the building, they were still technically tenants until the partnership agreement was finalized. "The property management company doesn't have the authority to sell," Alexander interjected. "Vertex Industries has entered into a binding agreement regarding this property." Wayland's smile remained unchanged, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "Has the paperwork been finalized, Alexander? My legal team seems to think otherwise." He turned back to Sophia. "Consider my offer, Ms. Chen. Unlike Vertex's charitable gestures, Wayland is prepared to give you the resources to build something truly impressive without strings attached." "There are always strings," Sophia replied evenly. "The only question is whether they're visible or hidden." A sleek black car pulled up behind Wayland's SUV, and Jason Chen emerged, dressed in MIT sweatpants and a rumpled T-shirt, clearly having rushed from campus. He approached the group, concern evident in his expression. "Sophia," Darius texted me, "what's going on?" His gaze flickered between his sister, Alexander, and Wayland. "Jason," Wayland greeted him warmly. "I was just discussing a potential opportunity with your sister. a chance to relocate the community center to a state-of-the-art facility with Wayland's support. After coincidentally showing interest right when Vertex formed a partnership, Jason observed, his youthful face displaying surprising shrewdness, and immediately following a fire that compromised the current building. Wayland's expression cooled slightly. The timing is unfortunate but irrelevant. Our offer stands on its merits. As does ours, Alexander stated firmly. Ms. Chen, a choice is yours, of course, but I believe our proposal represents a true partnership rather than a corporate acquisition of community assets. Sophia looked between the two powerful men, then at her brother and the teenagers who had stood guard over the damaged building. Her decision seemed to crystallize in that moment. Mr. Wayland, I appreciate your interest, but this center isn't relocating. It belongs in this neighborhood, serving these people. She gestured toward Darius and his friends. These students grew up here. They deserve to see investment in their community, not extraction of its resources. Wayland's pleasant facade slipped momentarily. That's disappointingly short-sighted, Ms. Chen. Sentiment is a poor business strategy. Perhaps, Alexander interjected, but community loyalty is an excellent long-term investment, something Vertex is committed to demonstrating. He stepped forward, effectively positioning himself between Wayland and Sophia. Now, if you don't mind, we have renovation plans to discuss. After a tense moment, Wayland nodded curtly. As you wish. Though I suspect the property managers may have different priorities. He handed Sophia a folder. My offer in writing. When you reconsider, call me directly. With that, he and his associates returned to the SUV and departed. Once they were gone, Jason turned to his sister. You okay? Darius made it sound like an invasion. I'm fine, Sophia assured him. Just tired of powerful men making decisions about our community without consulting the people who actually live here. She glanced at Alexander. No offense. None taken, Alexander replied, genuinely understanding her perspective. Though I hope I'm proving to be a different kind of partner. Jason studied Alexander with the analytical gaze that seemed characteristic of the Chen siblings. Your offer to work with my research team was unexpected, especially the ethical framework requirements. Necessary, Alexander said simply. Technology without ethical constraints becomes destructive rather than constructive. I suspect that's a perspective your sister helped shape. Since I was 12, Jason confirmed with a slight smile. She never let me forget that innovation should serve humanity, not the other way around. As they spoke, Darius and the other teenagers gathered around Sophia, eager to share their self-appointed security efforts at the damaged building. Alexander watched their interaction, noting the natural leadership Sophia displayed and the genuine respect the young people showed her in return. In that moment, observing the Chen siblings and the community they had both chosen to serve in different ways, Alexander felt something shift within his own perspective. The acquisition deals and corporate maneuvering that had dominated his focus for years suddenly seemed hollow compared to the authentic connection unfolding before him. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from the Vertex board chairman. Acquisition target had officially accepted their offer, rejecting Wayland's competing bid. It was a significant corporate victory, one that would normally command his full attention and celebration. Instead, Alexander found himself more interested in the conversation happening among the community members, their plans for the center's renovation, their visions for expanded programs, their unwavering commitment to a neighborhood most corporate leaders would never voluntarily visit. He answered the call, accepting the chairman's congratulations with appropriate enthusiasm while watching Sophia engage with her community. The parallel tracks of his life, corporate success and emerging social consciousness, were beginning to intersect in ways he had never anticipated. 3 weeks after the fire, Alexander stood in the center of the damaged east wing, now stripped to its structural elements. Construction crews moved purposefully around him, following the ambitious renovation plans that had evolved through daily collaboration between Vertex's architects and the community's representatives. The transformation was already visible. New electrical systems snaked through freshly framed walls, high-capacity internet cables awaited connection, and the framework for glass-enclosed classrooms took shape where once stood cramped, outdated spaces. Yet despite these physical changes, Alexander found himself more captivated by the less tangible transformation occurring in the partnership itself. "The robotics lab will be here," Sophia explained, pointing to a section near the back of the building. She stood beside him in a hard hat and boots, her usual professional attire replaced by practical workwear, as she split her time between overseeing the renovation and managing the displaced programs at the Vertex facilities. "Darius and his team have already recruited 50 new students who want to join once we reopen. We should expand the space," Alexander suggested, studying the blueprint spread across a makeshift table. "Their regional competition performance last weekend suggests we're underestimating the program's potential." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You watched the competition?" "I sponsored it," Alexander corrected, though the clarification wasn't entirely accurate. He had indeed attended the event, finding himself unexpectedly invested in the team's performance. Their approach to the engineering challenge was innovative, exactly the kind of creative problem-solving the incubator should nurture. Before Sophia could respond, Miguel approached, his tablet displaying renderings of the planned technology center that would occupy the building's second floor. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Reed, we've finalized the layout for the developer workstations," he said, his former hesitation around Alexander now replaced with professional confidence. "We increased the collaborative spaces as suggested and adjusted the lighting system for better energy efficiency." Alexander reviewed the designs, noting the thoughtful integration of communal and private workspaces. "This matches industry standards at top tech firms," he observed. "Have you considered adding a dedicated area for venture capital pitches? Many incubator graduates struggle with investor presentations." Miguel nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. We could install recording equipment so participants can review and refine their presentations. Vertex's marketing team could provide mentorship in that area," Alexander added, already mentally allocating resources. "I'll have Clara coordinate with you on the details." As Miguel departed to implement the changes, Sophia gave Alexander a speculative look. "You're going well beyond our agreement, you know. First the robotics competition, now pitch training. The board must be questioning your focus." "Actually, they're quite pleased with the arrangement," Alexander replied, though this was a selective interpretation of the board's mixed reactions. "The PR value alone has boosted our stock by 6%, and the recruitment potential addresses a significant pain point in our technical divisions." "Always the businessman," Sophia remarked, though her tone held more amusement than criticism. "Of course," Alexander agreed easily. "But effective business isn't always about immediate profit. Sometimes it's about building ecosystems that generate value over time." They exited the construction zone, stepping into the afternoon sunlight, where temporary trailers housed the center's administrative functions. Community members came and went, many greeting Sophia by name, and now acknowledging Alexander with growing familiarity. "The community council meeting is at 4, Sophia reminded him as they removed their hard hats. "They're expecting an update on the incubator admissions process." "I'll be there," Alexander assured her. "I've been working with Jason on a blind evaluation system to ensure selection based on merit rather than connections." Sophia's expression softened at the mention of her brother. "He's quite impressed with you, you know. Says you actually listen to his ethical concerns instead of treating them as obstacles." "They're not obstacles," Alexander responded. They're guardrails that ensure technology serves its proper purpose. Ignoring them is simply bad business in the long run. A notification chimed on Alexander's phone, a message from Clara about an urgent situation at Vertex headquarters. I need to handle something before the council meeting, he said, already typing a response. Corporate crisis management never stops, it seems. Go. Sophia nodded understandingly. We've got things covered here. The urgent situation turned out to be a visit from Victor Wayland himself, who sat comfortably in Alexander's office when he arrived at Vertex Tower an hour later. Victor, Alexander greeted him coolly. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Wayland smiled, the expression not reaching his calculating eyes. Just a friendly visit between competitors. Your assistant was kind enough to accommodate me when I mentioned it was a matter of mutual interest. How thoughtful of her, Alexander replied, making a mental note to clarify visitor protocols with Clara. He took his seat behind the obsidian desk, its imposing surface now cluttered with community center plans alongside corporate documents, a visual representation of his increasingly divided focus. What's this matter of mutual interest? Eastside Community Center, Wayland said, simply placing a thick folder on the desk, or more specifically the property it occupies. My legal team has been having fascinating conversations with Riverfront Holdings, the actual owner of the building. Alexander maintained his composed expression despite the unpleasant surprise. He had assumed Vertex's agreement with the community center had secured the property, but evidently there were complications he hadn't been informed about. I'm aware of the ownership structure, he bluffed. It's been addressed in our partnership agreement. Has it? Wayland's smile widened slightly. Because Riverfront Holdings has tentatively accepted my purchase offer, pending final approval from their board next week. Once completed, the community center's lease will be terminated for necessary redevelopment. Alexander felt a cold anger building behind his professional facade. That would be an extraordinarily short-sighted business decision, Victor. The community backlash alone would be directed at an anonymous holding company, not Wayland Corp, Victor interrupted smoothly. We'd only appear after the dust settles, as the benevolent corporate citizen offering a new, modern facility in a more suitable location, one conveniently adjacent to our new research campus. The strategy was both cynical and brilliant, a corporate maneuver that Alexander himself might have orchestrated in the past. Displace the community programs under the shield of a holding company, weather the brief public relations storm, then swoop in as the savior with a shiny replacement that served Wayland's strategic interests. What do you want, Victor? Alexander asked directly. You didn't come here just to gloat about real estate acquisitions. Wayland leaned back, studying Alexander with evident curiosity. I'm genuinely intrigued by your sudden interest in community development, Alexander. It seems out of character for the man who once shuttered a factory on Christmas Eve to improve on quarterly numbers. People evolve, Alexander replied tersely. Your point? My point is that I'm offering you an elegant exit strategy. Wayland gestured toward the folder. A joint venture between Wayland and Vertex to create a state-of-the-art community technology center in a new location. We share the costs, share the PR benefits, and each gain access to the innovation pipeline. The East Side property then becomes available for more economically productive uses. Alexander opened the folder, scanning the proposal with practiced efficiency. The terms were surprisingly favorable. Wayland was offering a genuine partnership rather than a competitive trap. Yet something fundamental was missing from the glossy renderings and impressive financial projections. And what happens to the existing community? Alexander asked. The elderly ESL students who can't travel to your more suitable location. The families who rely on proximity to the food pantry. The children in after-school programs whose parents can't manage additional transportation logistics? Wayland waved a dismissive hand. Social services can adapt. The benefits of a modern facility outweigh the temporary disruption. To whom? Alexander challenged. Not to the people actually using the services. I never took you for a sentimentalist. Alexander, Wayland observed, his tone hardening slightly. Is this about the community or about Sophia Chen? My sources tell me you've been spending considerable time with Harvard's most overqualified community organizer. The implication triggered an unexpected surge of protective anger in Alexander, but he maintained his composed exterior. My interest is in sustainable business practices, Victor. Destroying functioning community infrastructure for short-term gain is neither sustainable nor good business. Fine words from the notorious corporate raider, Wayland scoffed. But rhetoric aside, you have until Friday to consider my offer. After that, events will proceed with or without your participation. He stood, straightening his immaculate suit. For what it's worth, I respect what you're trying to do. I'm simply offering a more practical approach to achieving similar ends. After Wayland departed, Alexander sat motionless behind his desk, the joint venture proposal open before him. The offer was indeed elegant in its corporate logic, a clean, profitable solution that would enhance both companies' public images, while generating tangible financial returns. 6 months ago, he would have accepted without hesitation. Now, he found himself instead reaching for his phone to call Sophia, then hesitating. What could he tell her? That despite all his promises and plans, the community center's future was threatened by corporate maneuvering he had failed to anticipate. That the property owner could legally terminate their lease, rendering their partnership plans meaningless. Instead, he called Clara. Find out everything about Riverfront Holdings, ownership structure, board members, financial pressures, everything, and get me a meeting with our legal team in 30 minutes. By the time Alexander arrived at the community council meeting that evening, he had developed a partial strategy to address the Wayland threat, though significant obstacles remained. The council, a diverse group of neighborhood residents, program participants, and local business owners, had gathered in the community center's main hall, the only part of the building still safely usable during renovations. Sophia began the meeting with updates on the renovation progress and temporary program arrangements, her natural leadership evident in how she addressed concerns and acknowledged challenges. When the discussion turned to the technology incubator, she introduced Alexander not as a corporate partner, but as a collaborator, a subtle distinction that reflected the evolving nature of their relationship. Alexander presented the incubator, plans with uncharacteristic humility, emphasizing that community input had shaped and improved the initial concept. He outlined the blind admission process developed with Jason, the mentorship structure involving both Vertex employees and successful community entrepreneurs like Miguel, and the pathways to employment that would ensure participants could build careers without leaving their neighborhood. Questions. He concluded, bracing himself for the skepticism he still occasionally encountered from community members. An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. Mrs. Williams, Sophia had told him, the art teacher who had helped her apply to college years ago. This all sounds wonderful, Mr. Reed, but what guarantees do we have that Vertex won't lose interest once the publicity dies down? We've seen corporate promises come and go in this neighborhood. It was a fair question, one that resonated with Alexander's current concerns about the property situation. Vertex's commitment is contractually binding, he began, then paused, recognizing the inadequacy of this corporate response. But more importantly, I'm personally invested in this partnership's success, not just as Vertex's CEO, but as someone who believes in what we're building together. Mrs. Williams studied him with shrewd eyes that had evaluated generations of students. "You've changed since your first visit," she observed. "Less stiff, more human." A ripple of knowing laughter spread through the room, and Alexander found himself smiling, despite the serious concerns weighing on his mind. "I'll take that as a compliment," he replied. The meeting continued, with community members offering insights and suggestions that further refined the incubator concept. Alexander listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes or asking clarifying questions. The collaborative energy in the room stood in stark contrast to the sterile efficiency of corporate boardrooms he was accustomed to navigating. As the meeting concluded, Sophia approached him. "You seem distracted tonight," she observed quietly. "Everything okay at Vertex?" Alexander hesitated, unwilling to burden her with the Wayland threat until he had a more concrete solution. "Just the usual corporate complexities," he replied. "Nothing that can't be managed." Sophia clearly didn't believe him, but didn't press further. "Jason mentioned you've been consulting him on some kind of ethical framework for AI applications. He's quite excited about it." "He's got remarkable insights for someone so young," Alexander acknowledged. "His perspective on balancing innovation with social responsibility is refreshing. It runs in the family," Sophia said with a slight smile. "Our parents were both engineers who believed technology should serve humanity, not replace human connection." As they walked together toward the exit, community members stopped them periodically, thanking Sophia for specific program adjustments, asking Alexander technical questions about the incubator, sharing stories of how the center had impacted their lives. Each interaction deepened Alexander's resolve to protect what they were building, regardless of Wayland's machinations. Outside, the spring evening had turned chilly, a light rain beginning to fall. Alexander instinctively removed his jacket, offering it to Sophia when he noticed she had forgotten hers inside. "I'm fine," she insisted, though she was clearly cold. "Stubbornness seems to be another Chen family trait," Alexander observed, draping the jacket over her shoulders, despite her protest. "Along with an irrational resistance to practical assistance," Sophia laughed, accepting the jacket with a mock bow. "Touché, Mr. Reed, though I could say the same about certain CEOs who refuse to share what's really bothering them." Alexander met her perceptive gaze, weighing his options. She deserved to know about the threat to the center, but he wanted to present solutions alongside problems. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said instead. "There are some developments we should discuss, but I need to gather more information first." "That sounds ominously corporate," Sophia replied, her expression turning serious. "Is the partnership in jeopardy?" "Not if I can help it," Alexander assured her with more confidence than he felt. "I just need 24 hours to address a potential complication." "All right," Sophia agreed after studying him for a moment. "But no fancy restaurants with $200 wine lists. This is a working dinner, not a corporate schmooze session." "Noted," Alexander said, finding himself unexpectedly looking forward to the evening despite the serious matters they would need to discuss. "I know a place that serves the best dumplings outside of Taiwan. Jason recommended it, actually." Sophia's expression softened at the mention of her brother. "The Jade Dragon? That was our parents' favorite restaurant." She shook her head slightly, a bemused smile playing at her lips. "Alexander Reed, eating at a hole-in-the-wall dumpling shop. The board would be scandalized." "The board doesn't need to know everything," Alexander replied, returning her smile despite the weight of concerns he carried. "Some partnerships transcend corporate governance." The Jade Dragon occupied a narrow storefront wedged between a laundromat and a convenience store, its faded red awning and steamed-up windows offering little hint of the culinary treasures within. Alexander arrived 15 minutes early, having spent most of the day in intense negotiations that left him mentally exhausted but strategically positioned to address the Wayland threat. Inside, the restaurant was modest but immaculate. 10 tables, covered in red cloth, walls adorned with Chinese calligraphy and faded photographs, and the rich aroma of garlic, ginger, and star anise permeating the air. An elderly woman greeted him with a surprised expression, clearly not accustomed to seeing 6'2" executives in tailored suits among her usual clientele. "Table for 2, Alexander said, adding carefully, "I'm meeting Sophia Chen." The woman's expression immediately warmed. "Ah, Ms. Sophia's friend. Very good, very good. Special table for you." She led him to a corner spot, partially screened by a decorative wooden partition. "Miss Sophia and brother Jason, very good people. Their parents eat here every week before—" She made a solemn gesture. "Very sad. Very good family." Alexander nodded, accepting the menu she offered. "They spoke highly of your dumplings. Best in Boston," the woman declared proudly before shuffling back to the kitchen. Sophia arrived precisely on time, her professional attire replaced by jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. The transformation was striking. Without the structured clothing that served as a kind of armor in her professional life, she appeared younger, more relaxed, though her observant eyes retained their characteristic sharpness. "You found it," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "And Mrs. Lin didn't try to marry you off to her granddaughter, so I'd call that a successful first encounter." Alexander smiled, feeling some of the day's tension ease. "She seemed more interested in your family history than my marital status." "The Chens have been coming here for 20 years, Sophia explained. "When our parents died, Mrs. Lin showed up at the funeral with enough food to feed 50 people and refused payment. She's been a fixture in our lives ever since." As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Lin appeared with a pot of tea and a knowing smile. "No need to order," she announced. "I make special dinner for Ms. Sophia and friend." Before they could protest, she vanished back into the kitchen, leaving them alone with steaming cups of fragrant jasmine tea. Sophia laughed softly at Alexander's bemused expression. "Resistance is futile," she advised. "Mrs. Lin believes menu selection is too important to be left to customers." "I'm beginning to see where you get your decisiveness," Alexander observed, taking a sip of the tea. They fell into surprisingly easy conversation, discussing the day's developments at the temporary facility and the progress of the renovation. Alexander found himself relaxing into the simple surroundings, the absence of corporate pretension strangely liberating. Mrs. Lin periodically appeared with delicious offerings: crisp scallion pancakes, steaming bamboo baskets of dumplings with impossibly thin wrappers, tender greens in garlicky sauce. It was only after they had shared several dishes that Sophia steered the conversation toward the purpose of their meeting. "So," she said, placing her chopsticks beside her plate, "what's this complication you needed to address?" Alexander set down his teacup, his expression turning serious. "Victor Wayland visited me yesterday. He's attempting to purchase the community center building through Riverfront Holdings, the property owner." Sophia's expression darkened. "Riverfront assured us our lease was secure when we negotiated the renovation arrangements. Technically it is, until the property changes hands," Alexander explained. "Wayland plans to terminate the lease for redevelopment purposes once the acquisition is complete." "He can't do that," Sophia protested, though her tone suggested she knew better. "The community depends on that location. Our programs are designed around neighborhood accessibility." "I know," Alexander nodded grimly, "which is why I've spent the day developing countermeasures." He outlined what he had discovered. Riverfront Holdings was facing financial pressure from several underperforming properties in their portfolio. Wayland had offered a premium price for the East Side building, making it difficult for the company's board to refuse on purely financial grounds. "So what's your solution?" Sophia asked, her analytical mind already working on the problem. "A three-pronged approach," Alexander replied. "First, I've submitted a competing offer through a separate holding company, slightly higher than Wayland's, but structured to appear as an independent real estate investment. Why the secrecy? Because the second prong involves public pressure," Alexander continued. "If word leaks that Wayland is attempting to displace a community center, it creates reputational risk. But that strategy only works if Vertex appears uninvolved in the property transaction itself." Sophia nodded slowly, following his reasoning. "And the third prong?" "A backup plan," Alexander admitted. "If we can't secure the current property, we've identified 3 alternative locations within a 2-block radius. Not ideal, but viable if necessary." Mrs. Lin appeared with a final course, steamed buns filled with sweet red bean paste, providing a momentary pause in their strategic discussion. After she departed, Sophia regarded Alexander with a complex expression. "You've gone to extraordinary lengths," she observed, "far beyond what our partnership agreement requires." Alexander considered his response carefully. Over the past weeks, his involvement with the community center had evolved from a strategic business decision into something more personal, though he hadn't fully examined the transformation until now. "The center matters," he said simply. "Not just as a Vertex initiative, but as a community resource worth protecting on its own merits. I've seen what it means to people like Darius, Mr. Jackson, the families at the food pantry. Allowing Wayland to dismantle that for corporate advantage would be," he searched for the right word, "unconscionable." Sophia studied him, her expression softening. "You really have changed since that first meeting in your office." "I've gained perspective," Alexander acknowledged, "though I maintain that my initial job offer wasn't entirely unreasonable." "If you can't pay, work for me," Sophia quoted with raised eyebrows. "Perhaps the delivery needed refinement," he conceded, with a hint of a smile. Their conversation shifted to the technology incubator curriculum Jason had been developing with Vertex's engineering team. The tension of the Wayland situation temporarily receded as they discussed the potential impact of combining community knowledge with corporate resources. As they finished the sweet buns, Sophia's phone chimed with a message. She checked it, her expression immediately concerned. "It's from Miguel. There's water damage in the West Wing now. A pipe burst during the renovation work." She typed a quick response. "The construction supervisor is handling the immediate situation, but I should check on it." "I'll come with you," Alexander said without hesitation, already signaling for the check. Mrs. Lin refused payment, waving away Alexander's credit card with firm insistence. "First time for Miss Sophia's special friend, no charge," she declared. "Next time you pay double." Outside, the spring evening had turned pleasant, the earlier rain giving way to clear skies and a gentle breeze. They walked toward Alexander's car, the conversation turning to practical aspects of addressing the new damage at the center. "This could actually work in our favor," Alexander mused as they drove. "If the building requires more extensive renovation than originally planned, it strengthens the case for the current tenants to remain during the process. No new owner would want the liability of displacing an established community resource during ongoing construction." Sophia glanced at him with newfound appreciation. "You're applying corporate strategy to community defense. It's rather impressive. Just adapting the tools at hand," Alexander replied, "though I admit I never expected to use hostile takeover tactics to protect a community center." They arrived to find Miguel and the construction supervisor examining the damaged area. Water had seeped through a wall into the main hall, threatening the temporary administrative space where essential records were stored. The good news is we caught it quickly, Miguel reported. The bad news is we need to move everything out of this section tonight. The restoration team needs to tear out the drywall immediately to prevent mold. Where can we relocate the files? Sophia asked, already surveying the limited options in the partially renovated building. My apartment is nearby, Miguel offered. But it's small, and there's a lot to move. Vertex has secure storage, Alexander suggested. I can have a team, here in 30 minutes to pack and transport everything safely. Sophia hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of community records being removed to a corporate facility. Alexander understood her concern immediately. Or we could use the warehouse space temporarily, he amended. Community volunteers maintain control of the materials. Vertex just provides the location and security. The compromise satisfied her. While Alexander arranged for the warehouse preparation, Sophia organized a volunteer team to carefully pack the center's records. Within an hour, a coordinated operation was underway. Community members and Vertex employees working side by side to protect the center's institutional memory. Alexander found himself helping Darius and several robotics team members disassemble computer equipment that might be damaged by the increasing humidity. The teenagers worked with surprising efficiency, their initial wariness of the CEO having evolved into a cautious respect. Mr. Reed, Darius said, as they carefully wrapped a monitor in protective plastic, is it true Wayland Corp is trying to shut down the center? Alexander paused, surprised by the teenager's direct question. Where did you hear that? Darius shrugged. People talk. My cousin works security at Wayland's downtown office. Said they're planning some big development that would revitalize this neighborhood. His expression made clear his opinion of such revitalization. There are corporate interests in this area, Alexander acknowledged carefully, mindful of Sophia's desire to protect the community from unnecessary worry. But the center has strong defenders. Like Vertex? Darius asked skeptically. Like its own community, Alexander corrected. Though yes, Vertex is committed to supporting that community's priorities, not replacing them. Darius seemed to weigh this answer, his young face serious beyond his years. My brother got caught up in dealing because there weren't programs like this when he was my age. Now he's serving 5 years. He secured the wrapped monitor with tape. Places like this matter, you know. They're not just buildings. I'm beginning to understand that, Alexander replied, struck by the teenager's candor. By midnight, the essential materials had been safely relocated to the warehouse, and emergency dehumidifiers hummed in the damaged section of the building. Sophia had worked tirelessly alongside the volunteers, her leadership evident in how smoothly the crisis response had unfolded. As the last team departed, she and Alexander stood in the partially emptied hall, surveying the results of their efforts. Sophia's exhaustion was visible now, the composed community director giving way to a woman who had been managing multiple crises for weeks. You should get some rest, Alexander suggested gently. The restoration team will work through the night. No, Sophia sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair, but there's still the Wayland situation to address. If we lose this building, we won't, Alexander stated with quiet conviction. But even if complications arise with the property, the community center itself isn't defined by these walls. It's defined by people like you, Darius, Mr. Jackson, Miguel, all those who give it purpose and meaning. Sophia looked at him with tired surprise. That's remarkably philosophical for a corporate CEO. I contain multitudes, Alexander replied with a hint of self-deprecation. Even Harvard MBAs are capable of growth. This earned a genuine laugh from Sophia, the sound echoing in the nearly empty hall. Speaking of growth, the board called me. Today, they've noted your excessive personal involvement in what was supposed to be a straightforward corporate social responsibility initiative. And, Alexander asked, unsurprised by the board's concerns. "And I defended you," Sophia said. Simply, told them your approach represented innovative stakeholder capitalism rather than mission drift. Stakeholder capitalism, Alexander repeated, amused by her deployment of business school terminology. Very diplomatic. Harvard MBA, she reminded him with a small smile. I can speak corporate when necessary. The moment between them stretched, comfortable yet charged with unacknowledged possibilities. Alexander found himself reluctant to end the evening, despite the late hour and the challenges. Still facing them. "I should get going," Sophia said finally, breaking the silence. "Early meeting with the insurance adjusters tomorrow." "I'll drive you home," Alexander offered. "It's just a few blocks," she began to protest, then reconsidered. "Actually, a ride would be great. I'm too tired to argue about unnecessary assistance." "Progress," Alexander observed wryly as they walked to his car. The drive to Sophia's apartment took less than 5 minutes, a modest building on a quiet street not far from the community center. Alexander pulled up to the entrance, the car's headlights illuminating a small but well-maintained lobby. "Thank you," Sophia said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "For the ride and everything else?" "We're partners," Alexander replied simply. "Addressing challenges is part of the arrangement." Sophia studied him in the dim light of the car's interior. "Is that all this is? A partnership arrangement?" The question hung between them, direct yet layered with meaning. Alexander felt an unfamiliar uncertainty, not about his growing feelings for Sophia, which had become increasingly difficult to ignore, but about the appropriate boundaries of their complex relationship. "I think we both know it's evolved beyond that," he admitted carefully. "But the timing is complicated," Sophia finished for him. "The center, Wayland, the renovation, there's a lot at stake beyond personal considerations." "Precisely," Alexander agreed, relieved by her understanding, "which doesn't mean those personal considerations aren't significant." Sophia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we address the priorities in sequence. First, we secure the center's future. After that," she left the sentence unfinished, possibility hanging in the air between them. "A sound strategic approach," Alexander said with a smile that reached his eyes. "Harvard Business School," Sophia reminded him lightly as she opened the car door. "They taught us something about priorities between all those corporate finance lectures." As he watched her enter her building, Alexander felt a certainty forming within him, not just about his growing feelings for Sophia, but about the path forward with the community center. Whatever corporate maneuvering Wayland attempted, Alexander would meet and exceed it. The center would survive and thrive, not just because of business strategy, but because it mattered to its community, to Sophia, and now, unexpectedly, but undeniably to him. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Eastside Community Center's newly renovated East Wing as Alexander stood beside Sophia, watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony. 6 months had passed since the Wayland confrontation. 6 months of strategic maneuvering that culminated in Vertex purchasing the building outright and establishing a community land trust to protect it permanently. The center buzzed with activity, the technology incubator already hosting its first cohort of neighborhood entrepreneurs. Darius, now heading to MIT on a scholarship Alexander had quietly established, demonstrated the robotics team's latest creation to wide-eyed elementary school children. Mr. Jackson guided seniors through computer basics in a lab filled with state-of-the-art equipment, while Miguel mentored aspiring developers in the glass-walled workspace upstairs. "Hard to believe this started with you mocking me for being unable to pay the rent," Sophia whispered, a smile playing at her lips. Alexander took her hand, their relationship now openly acknowledged after months of focusing on the center's revival. "One of my better mistakes," he admitted, "though I maintain you could have mentioned the Harvard MBA earlier." and miss seeing the great Alexander Reed speechless. Never. She squeezed his hand as the ribbon fell and applause erupted around them. Later, as community members celebrated throughout the building, Alexander and Sophia slipped away to the rooftop garden, a new addition that offered a stunning view of the neighborhood the center served. "What's next?" Sophia asked, leaning against the railing beside him. Alexander smiled, looking out at the city stretching before them. "Something tells me this is just the beginning. Thank you for joining us. For if you can't pay, work for me." We hope this story of judgment transformed into understanding touched your heart. If you believe in second chances and the power of seeing beyond first impressions, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that reveal how our deepest connections often begin with our greatest misunderstandings. Remember, sometimes our harshest judgments lead to our most beautiful transformations. See you in our next soul story.